So you want to be an RA. Hi everyone, my name's Ina, and I decided to make this video because I've been an RA for 3 years now, and I know I get a lot of questions around this time of the year when RA interviews are coming out and RA selection processes are happening about what to do if you really want to be an RA. To be honest, an RA job is amazing. It's the best job I've ever had. I love it so much, but I know that it's a very competitive job to get, and I know a lot of people are always trying to get this job. A lot of it is because of the amazing benefits that come with it. For a lot of schools, it's very, very different, but for my school, it comes with room and board and a bunch of awesome benefits. But because of that, there is always a very competitive part of the job, and there's very limited spots to be an RA. There's lots of students that want it, and there's just not always enough spots. So even if you are a great candidate, sometimes you don't get the job. And that's not because you are a bad candidate. A lot of the times it's just because there's not enough positions to be able to put all these great candidates into. So I thought I would make this video and kind of give my tips on how to make yourself stand out as a candidate and what to do in your interview that will make you memorable and stand out. So my number one tip kind of won't apply if you are about to interview next week or are about to interview very, very soon. So the number one thing I always tell people when they tell me that they want to be an RA is to become visible on campus. A big part of my job is to be visible, to be relatable, to be someone that people have seen on campus and can know my face and feel comfortable talking to me if they need anything. And another aspect is networking. To be honest, the people that hire the RAs, they want to know that you are a good candidate, and there's only so much you can find out in a 40-minute interview, an hour interview. So if they've had interactions with you in the past and they know how you act and who you are, they're more likely to be willing to give you a shot because they kind of know more than just that 40-minute window and that resume that you sent in. That doesn't mean go bothering them at their door all the time. Just people that are in residential life, they happen to go to a lot of events on campus, and if you are at those events, they'll be able to kind of recognize you and put a face to a name, which will be great in your interview because you want to make sure that you stand out. My second tip is something that's going to be more practical if you have your interview coming up soon. This is something I did when I interviewed to be an RA, and it really helped me. What I did was a simple Google search. I Googled most frequently asked RA questions for interviews or something along those lines. You can just Google something generally like that, and I was able to find a list that had just a bunch of questions that people could ask in an RA interview, and it kind of gave me, one, an idea of what they were looking for, and two, it allowed me to kind of practice those common questions in my head and figure out what I wanted to say. Now, that doesn't mean that all of the questions I was asked were on that list, but it kind of helped me understand what I would say if I got that question, or just help me understand the types of questions that might be asked. So that was really helpful for me. Kind of understanding that most interviews start with the tell me about yourself question also is important, because that is kind of a make or break question. If you do really well on that, you can be very memorable. If you do terrible on that, you'll be memorable, but for the wrong reasons. You want to make sure that the tell me about yourself is kind of brief, to the point. You get all the important stuff in there, but none of the unnecessary. Don't tell them your life story. You're just kind of giving them a brief need to know type statement. Think elevator pitch. So yeah, that is an important thing about the interview. My third tip is to make sure you are yourself in your interview. I know that's something that probably a lot of people say, but as someone who's been a part of a lot of RA interviews, I've seen people who are completely themselves, confident in their answers, and I've also seen people who may be trying to fit an RA mold. And the truth is that all RAs are different, and they have different strengths and different weaknesses, and being yourself You might think that you need to be a different type of person to get the job, but really they might be looking for exactly who you are. So a big thing is just completely be yourself. If you're a little bit more shy, sometimes that's what we need. There's residents that are shy. Yeah, so completely be yourself. That's a huge thing. The more you are yourself, the more comfortable you'll be in your interview, and that'll really show. If you're acting a little timid in your interview, unsure of what you're supposed to answer, your interviewers will be able to see that, and they'll be able to see that you're just kind of trying to fit a mold. Just be yourself. That's the best thing that you can be in an interview. Another really important tip is to know the job well. From what I know, most RA jobs are pretty similar, but I know school to school they have their differences. And also, if you just know about RAs through like television shows or things like that, like that's not gonna necessarily help you much. So make sure if your school offers an informational session to kind of get to know the job, I would definitely take that opportunity. I know at my school they're required, so that is a really important thing to go to. If they're not required, I highly recommend that, because that's where you're gonna get all of your questions answered, where you'll be able to find out the differences or the specifics of that position. I know some schools, RAs work multiple times a week. Some schools have shifts and they have to stay at the desk like overnight. My school, we end at 11:15 and then we take our phone with us until the next morning. So every school functions differently, so it's really important to kind of understand the job to be able to answer questions effectively in your interview. Another thing that's kind of tying into that is most interviews will ask you at the end if you have any questions, and so that's a really good time to ask any questions that are things that you weren't able to find out in those informational sessions, but you want to make sure that you don't ask questions that are so obvious that it's clear that you just don't know the job. So if you ask something like, oh, what do we do when we work? That kind of question kind of tells them that you haven't really done your research and you don't really know what the job is, and that won't really look good. So definitely find out about the job, know what you're getting into, kind of understand your roles and responsibilities, and that'll even help you answer the questions, because you'll be able to maneuver your responses to kind of fit the job responsibilities. You want to make sure that you're hitting key points that you know are applicable in the job and that you can tie into your life experience. Another thing that I would suggest is to do something that will make an impression. Say something that will make you stand out, not something ridiculous, not something that's silly. Don't do that. Dress professionally, be professional, but maybe something in the tell me about yourself question. Say something that's unique about you, something that will make you stand out. Everyone has that one special something that makes them stand out, so figure out what that is for you and make sure you say it in your interview. Most schools interview a lot of RAs, and a lot of the times it's the same people just over and over in the interviews, and at that point faces could start to blur. After seeing so many interviews, it's hard to pinpoint exactly who are the best candidates. If you do something that makes yourself stand out, you're more likely to be remembered and more likely to be remembered as like, oh yeah, that person would be a great RA. So I think that's really important. Another kind of bonus tip is to just talk to your RA or an RA that you feel comfortable talking to, because RAs have a lot of knowledge about what it is that they do. An RA has been in the role for a while, has dealt with a lot of situations, so they're really knowledgeable on how to deal with them, and if you have any questions, that's the best person to ask. An RA that you feel comfortable talking to is a great person to reach out to get resources. Ask them those really in-depth questions, or even questions that you don't want to ask an informational session. Like if you have questions like, is it worth it, or is it hard? A lot of people kind of are confused with, is it just a lot of work? Because I've heard both things. I've heard people say, oh, I could never be an RA, it's so much work. And it is a lot of work. But if it's something that you enjoy doing, then it doesn't really feel like work. Sometimes there's more paperwork things that do kind of feel like work, but to be honest, I love my residents. I love being an RA. I love the crafty side. Oh, that's another thing. being an RA, at least at my school, has a lot of crafty sides to it. I have to make door decks and bulletin boards and things like that, but I love that stuff. Just get to know what the job entails, what you'll be doing in the role, and if you'll be a good fit. To be honest, I always say that it's not a good idea to be an RA if you're just trying to do it for the compensation, because even though at most schools the compensation is great, it is a very intense job at times. So if you're just doing it for that, you can get worn out pretty fast. So make sure you're doing it for the right reasons, understand the job, make yourself stand out, ask the right questions, do your research, and you should be fine. Another thing that's important to remember, and I can't stress this enough, is if you don't get chosen this year, make sure you try again. A lot of schools will have things like alternates, so that basically means they were really considering you as a candidate, but there was just not enough positions, and at least the way my school does it is that they will send out a letter saying that you are an alternate, and you would fill out a contract just as a RA who was selected fills out a contract saying that you accept the alternate position, which basically means if they need you at some point, if an RA has to leave, if an RA unfortunately gets fired, if an RA had to transfer or something like that, basically if an RA becomes unable to do the RA job, they will call in an alternate to be an RA. And in all honesty, I was an alternate. My first year that I applied, I was on the alternate list, and I remember thinking, well, I didn't get it. Why would I be an alternate? And my mom convinced me to sign up to be an alternate. I was about to miss out on the opportunity of being an alternate. And luckily, my mom convinced me to still sign and be an alternate RA. A week before school, I got a call and was basically asked if I still was interested in the job, and I definitely was. And so I got called from that alternate list. So if you are an alternate, make sure you agree to be on that alternate list so that way they can contact you if that position becomes available. And if your school doesn't have that, or if you didn't get an alternate, or if you're on the alternate list and they didn't call you, make sure you try again. I know a lot of amazing RAs who didn't get it the first time. Sometimes the interviewers will think you're a great candidate, but maybe need some more experience. So my number one tip, if you don't get it the first time, is to become more involved on campus, to get more leadership opportunities, to prove that you are capable to succeed in this position. And at least at my school, the way it works is if you want to talk about why you didn't get it, a lot of them have an open door policy of coming in to ask questions about where you might be lacking, where your strengths were, where your weaknesses were. And I think that's a really great opportunity to figure out what you need to work on for next year, so that way you can become the best candidate you can be. If you have any questions that I haven't answered or want to know any more information, leave a comment below. Like this video if you enjoyed it and found it useful. If you want me to make any more videos about being an RA, I would love to. I love being an RA and I love talking about being an RA. I hope you enjoyed this video and you found it useful in any way, and good luck on those interviews. I know they can be daunting, but Res Life staff are usually really friendly and really nice. Everyone in that interview is rooting for you and wants you to do well, even if they don't know you. Disclaimer, everything I'm saying right now, I know from being an RA at my specific school. I think a lot of this stuff is applicable in other places, but the best place to get information is directly from your school and Res Life over there or fellow RAs. So definitely don't just go off of this video. I would definitely talk to other RAs and talk to Res Life to fully understand what that interview process is like at your school.